What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an early preview of Resonance, A Plague Tale Legacy, which is an upcoming action-adventure releasing on August 27th, and of course, related to the Plague Tale games. But before we get into that, I'm able to bring you this early preview because shortly after a look at this game via the Xbox Game Showcase a little earlier this month, Focus Entertainment reached out and asked if I wanted to, of course, take a look at it, which is what we are doing here. Now, ultimately, I had access to 2 chapters of this game, which is roughly 2 hours of the 20-ish hour runtime, but I'm only really going to be showing and talking about one of those. But first and foremost, I just straight up have not played the other 2 Plague Tale games, but in the case of this particular title, this is actually a prequel. It takes place about 15 years before both of those, and puts us in the role of Sophia, a character from the second game, and we'll be diving into her backstory as well as getting to the bottom of a curse on the Minotaur's Island. But all of that to tell you that if you're wondering where this stacks up in relation to the other 2 Plague Tale games, that's not really something I can provide for you, and I'm kind of looking at this from the viewpoint of a newcomer, I suppose. But in that way, I would say that a lot of this is fairly traditional action-adventure stuff. There is some combat, some puzzle solving, finding secrets and progressing through the environment, etc. So, with that in mind, it's probably also worth a mention that these 2 chapters that I had access to, chapters 5 and 6, were a little ways into the game, and so they added a little bit of extra tutorialization that would not normally be there. So there is that, I suppose. But let's start at the beginning with the basic story setup, how we've got here, etc. Because while Sophia is a character from the previous games, this is 15 years prior, and even then she's already been up to a lot. So Sophia was initially abandoned to a convent that she eventually escaped before joining her father's gang. This led her to being a smuggler, but none of that really did anything to answer the strange calls to a distant shore that she has had since childhood. So this island, of course, being the Minotaur's Island. The same Minotaur, of course, from Greek mythology, at odds with Theseus, etc. So, of course, she wants to get to the bottom of what that connection is, why it's happening. She's getting flashbacks to Theseus himself, actually, which is shown off in a couple of scenes. And if that wasn't enough to go on, there are also other people actively on the island searching out its secrets, of course, which is where a good bit of the combat happens. Now, as an action-adventure, this doesn't have super deep RPG-esque mechanics, and yet we do get a good look at some of the progression mechanics, mainly in the form of the loot and things we can pick up alongside skills and everything that we can learn. So it looks like along the journey here, while it will be mostly linear, you can find and of course utilize all sorts of items that you can equip, and then they provide general bonuses, usually helping you out in combat some way, drop chance, critical chance, a chance to avoid death, things like that. And the more you have, the better you are, and this is shown physically on Sophia by adding to the jewelry that she's got on. Alongside that, we can also find items around that you will pick up for resonance points. These resonance points allow you to then spend it on your skills and then upgrade those skills as well, and most of these seem to be aligned with Theseus himself in some way, and these are going to help you out in combat. Now, believe it or not, we do actually have a little bit of equipment beyond that in the form of swords. So Sophia uses swords and daggers primarily, and it looks like there are a variety of those swords that you can find, which will then have different effects in combat. Your basic one doesn't really do anything, but there is one that replaces your dagger attack with a large spinning sweep, just as an example, and there will be some interesting stuff to go on there, it looks like. Now, in terms of looking at what this game has to offer level-wise, again, I can only really show you the one, and then the other chapter was more linear, but the chapter that I'm showing you here was, I would say, very traditional action-adventure. You're kind of running around a few areas. There's a few sort of arenas where you're going to fight some enemies using the game's combat system, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then the rest was just like a little bit of light platforming and puzzle solving. A lot of the puzzle solving comes down to this prism you have, which can redirect lights, and you'll have to stand at a certain point and then use those lights to actually hit all the points and open something up, that kind of thing. There was a lot of that puzzle in particular. There were a couple others around just navigating light through various things, and it looks like a lot of the island was dedicated to various trials and the like, and some of those are presented as puzzles also, usually just seeing you interpreting some image or another. Now, this particular level was a bit more open-ended than the other chapter that I played through, which was much more linear, and as a result, there's a lot of places you can go, little secrets you can find, equipment to pick up, that sort of thing. But along the way, we're also going to, of course, be engaging in the combat. The combat is, I would say, relatively basic, but has a few extra things going on. You primarily have a sword and dagger, as I mentioned. You can attack enemies with either, however, attacking with your dagger is a charge-up attack that will typically deal critical damage if it is not blocked. As enemies try to attack you, you can, of course, block or dodge out of the way, and some attacks have to be dodged out of the way of, but you can also parry, and doing this will fill up a character's stun meter, which then allows you to get in close and perform one of those charge-up criticals that I mentioned, which is going to deal more damage. As you kill enemies, you regain health, so as long as you perform some of those actions without taking all of your life at once, you'll perform reasonably okay. So while the game is not specifically focused on parrying, I will say that if you're good at that, the game is going to be easier for you for sure. But there's also a couple other things. Occasionally, enemies or just the environment will have items you can pick up and typically throw at enemies in some way, which can bring them to a stun state immediately, or just deal a bunch of damage in the case of like a throwing dagger, that kind of stuff. And then there's also mechanics around breaking enemies' guard with like kicks, and there was a skill specifically for that as well. So all in all, I would say pretty stock standard action adventure stuff. And it seems to work well for what the game is actually trying to be. And yet, as much combat as there are also other mechanics that are not exactly stealth, but a little more closely related to that, where sometimes avoiding the fight is the best option. And jumping into the fray from an undetected state, like, getting the drop on enemies literally from dropping down on top of them, for example, can be a useful way to approach stuff. So there's a good bit going on. But I would say the ultimate success of this title come August will really be down to the writing, how much it leans into, of course, the mythological aspects of it, and how well paced it is across its roughly 20-hour projection, which obviously are things I simply cannot answer until that release date rolls around. But from this preview, I admit I am curious, and it seems like with this being a prequel, it's a decent enough place to jump into it, despite the other two Plague Tale games, so there is that. Now, I will say this game does have the unfortunate release date, at least for me personally, of going up against Star Wars Zero Company, which is a game I'm also really excited to play. And while I don't think those games are really competing for the same audience that much, it is a slightly annoying thing for me personally, so we'll see how that winds up shaking out, but I'm curious to play the rest of this and see how it goes, so you may well get a review out of me for this one. But I do think that is just about everything I wanted to call out for this early preview. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. Let me know how you feel about it down in the comment section below. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.